Chapter 6. An American Lawyer in Sweden. After a successful clerkship and rave recommendations from Judge Palmieri, law firms were now willing to hire Ruth. She was about to accept a job with Marty's Manhattan firm when Professor Hans Smit contacted her and asked if she'd meet him for lunch at the Harvard Club. Smit held law degrees from both Amsterdam University and Columbia. He had recently joined the Columbia faculty to work on an international civil procedure project funded by the Carnegie Foundation to do basic research on foreign systems of procedure and propose improvements of U.S. rules on transnational litigation. One goal was to make United States rules more accommodating to lawyers abroad who wanted to find evidence in the United States or access American courts. The project had grants to study procedure in France, Italy, and Sweden. Finding scholars willing to travel to France and Italy wasn't hard. Sweden was another matter. To meet Smit, she had to enter the Harvard Club through a red side door reserved for women. Not long into their conversation, he asked, "Ruth, how would you like to co-author a book about civil procedure in Sweden?" An odd idea, she thought. In fact, in that moment, she couldn't quite recall where Sweden was on the map in relation to Norway. But she'd always had a strong interest in civil procedure, and she liked the idea of traveling abroad and living on her own in Sweden. She'd never lived alone, having married young, going from the college dormitories to a home shared with her husband. The deciding factor was that she liked the notion of being an author of a book. She was also impressed that Smit not only was willing to hire a woman to work on his project, but also offered to pay her the same salary that men were being paid by the major law firms at the time. She accepted the job and began work in September of 1961. "I was rather shy when I came on board," she said, but Hans Smit helped by taking on the role of mentor, encouraging her and helping her feel at ease. Her first task was to become familiar with the language. Columbia provided a language tutor, a former dancer from the Swedish ballet, who offered Ruth both excellent language instruction and ballet gossip. She retained enough Swedish all her life to be able to watch Ingmar Bergman movies without subtitles and to translate the Swedish Code of Civil Procedure into English. In late spring of 1962, she boarded a plane for Sweden, leaving Jane with Marty so she could finish out first grade. In a few weeks, when Jane was out of school, Jane and Marty would join her. She did much of her work at the University of Lund and produced works of impressive scholarship. Civil procedure in Sweden offered a history of Swedish procedural law, the sources of Swedish procedural law, an outline of Swedish legal education, the structure of a Swedish lawsuit, and chapters on the expense of litigation and collection of judgments, concluding with a chapter on international cooperation. In 1969, the University of Lund awarded her an honorary law degree for her contributions to the book. Lessons in comparative civil procedure were not Ruth's main takeaways from her time abroad. In Sweden, for the first time, she felt the stirrings of what we now call feminism. The women's movement came to Sweden early. Ruth was startled to see that a relatively large percentage of law students, between 20% and 25%, were women. She was also impressed by the fact that the University of Lund had an excellent daycare center for children of students and faculty, something just about unknown then in the United States. There were even female judges. Most startling of all, she went to a proceeding in Stockholm and saw that the presiding judge was 8 months pregnant. Inflation in Sweden meant that most families required 2 incomes. A Swedish writer, Eva Moberg, published a column in a Swedish daily paper asking, "Why should women have 2 jobs and men only 1?" The idea was that the woman might have a job to help with the living expenses, but she was still the one expected to shop for children's clothes and have dinner on the table at 7 o'clock. How fair was that? Moberg's argument that women would not achieve equality simply from entering the workforce, and men would have to enter what was traditionally considered the women's sphere before there would be equality, was one that Marty and Ruth had already worked out for themselves. The whole debate was still a few years away from reaching the United States. Ruth was fascinated by the responses from different women. Some women were queen bees. They could handle everything, thank you very much. Others felt it was time for men to do their share of the housework, a revolutionary idea in 1962. While she was there, Swedish and American headlines exploded with the controversy of Sherri Finkbine and her abortion. The American actress, known as Miss Sherri on the Phoenix, Arizona version of a franchise children's television show, Romper Room, found herself embroiled in controversy when she became pregnant with her 5th child while taking thalidomide, a drug that, if taken by a pregnant woman, causes a condition known as phocomelia, in which the limbs of the fetus do not form, resulting in severely deformed children. Finkbine's doctor strongly recommended that she obtain an abortion. She scheduled an abortion, despite legal barriers. Arizona permitted abortions only if the life of the mother was in danger. The district attorney immediately threatened to prosecute the institution and any hospital staff who participated in the procedure. When the hospital canceled the procedure, Sherri's doctor requested a court order to proceed with the abortion, but the order was denied. International media coverage made Sherri Finkbine a major name. When she received death threats, the FBI had to step in to offer protection. Initially, the Finkbines traveled to Japan, hoping to secure an abortion, but the Japanese would not issue a visa. The Finkbines then flew to Sweden. To obtain an abortion in Sweden, Sherri had to initiate legal proceedings and appear before a panel that considered the social, medical, and spiritual consequences of an abortion. The panel approved her abortion. By then, she was at the end of her 1st trimester. The doctor who performed the abortion reported that the fetus had no legs, only one arm, and genitalia growing abnormally. As a result of the abortion, Sherri's husband was fired from his job as a high school teacher, and she was fired from her job as the host of Romper Room. That was also the summer Ruth read Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex. She found the book overwhelming, staggering. All the new information she was taking in, the Finkbine scandal, Eva Moberg's article, and Beauvoir's eye-opening book, she simply absorbed and tucked away for later. At the end of Ruth's first year on the project, she was promoted to associate director. She would return once more to Sweden the following summer, accompanied by both Jane and Marty, who planned to take vacation time from his firm. Just as her stay in Sweden showed Ruth new possibilities, coming home reminded her of the American dream. In an interview, she explained that after a prolonged stay in Sweden and becoming accustomed to people whose complexion was the same, she rode the New York subway and was struck by the amazing diversity in the United States. American diversity reminded her of the motto, of one many, an idea she preferred to the melting pot because Americans could keep their individual identities while being American. Meanwhile, Marty had made partner at his firm, where he discovered a love and aptitude for the tax code. He mastered the art of structuring a financial deal to minimize taxes. His father used to say about lawyers that they were no people. They would always say, no, you can't do it, or it costs too much to comply with the law. Marty, optimistic by nature, enjoyed structuring financial deals for maximum tax benefit because it made him a yes person. In 1963, at the conclusion of her work on the project, Ruth was again planning to work for Marty's firm when a Columbia professor, Walter Gellhorn, who was something of a one-person placement office for law school faculty positions, asked Ruth to come see him in his office. When she arrived, he asked, "Ruth, what's your name doing on this Harvard list when you're a Columbia graduate?" At first, she had no idea what he was talking about. Then she remembered that Harvard had sent her a form with instructions to fill out if she was interested in a career teaching law. She'd filled it out and sent it back, but thought no more of it because at that time there were only 14 women teaching law in the entire country. In that moment, in Walter's office, she jumped to the wrong conclusion. "Walter," she said, "is Columbia interested in me?" He said not Columbia, but Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey School of Law. Rutgers was looking to fill a vacancy left by their professor of civil procedure, Clarence Clyde Ferguson, who left to take the position of dean at Howard Law School. Rutgers tried to replace him with another African-American man, but having failed in that quest, they were looking for a woman. Rutgers, one of the few law schools willing to hire a woman, already had a female professor on the faculty, Ava Hanks. Ruth always thought she'd like to teach law, but she thought she'd rather practice for a few years first. There were so few teaching positions available to women, though, that she thought she'd better take one while she had the chance. So she interviewed with the hiring committee at Rutgers. Before she was offered the position, a member of the faculty asked Ava Hanks if she'd be upset if they hired another woman. Professor Hanks, evidently finding the question strange, asked, "Why would I mind?" The colleague said, "Because you will no longer be the only woman on the faculty." She just looked at him and assured him that it was quite all right. When Willard Heuvel, the dean at Rutgers, offered Ruth a faculty position, he warned her that because Rutgers was a state school with limited resources, she would have to take a cut in salary. She expected that, but when she heard the amount she was being offered, she was surprised. She asked about the salary of a male professor who had graduated law school the same year as her. The dean admitted they were paying him more. He said, "Ruth, he has a wife and 2 children to support, and Marty has a good-paying job with a law firm."